The whiskey burned just right as I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by the familiar smell of copper wire and electrical tape. 2 years since Beth walked out, and I'd finally gotten used to the quiet. No more arguments about money, no more passive-aggressive comments about my small-time electrical business. Just me, Will Parish, 43 years old, running Parish Electric like my father did before me. The blue lights flashing through my basement window changed everything. Will Parish? The officer's voice carried down from upstairs where my sister Connie was answering the door. I could hear her sharp lawyer tone already kicking in. He's downstairs, but what's this about? I climbed the steps slowly, knowing whatever waited up there would ruin my peaceful evening. 3 cops stood in my living room, led by Detective Lane, who used to drink with my father at the Junction Bar. Will, we need to talk, Lane said, avoiding eye contact. There's been an accusation of embezzlement from Parish Electric's accounts. The words hit me like touching a live wire. Embezzlement? From my own company? Your ex-wife filed a complaint this afternoon. Says you've been siphoning money from joint business accounts that were never properly divided in the divorce. Connie stepped closer, her dark eyes already scanning the paperwork. Let me see those documents. As Lane handed over the folder, I caught something that made my stomach drop. The bank statements showed transfers I'd never authorized, using access codes I hadn't touched in months. But there, in the corner of each page, was a digital signature that looked exactly like mine. This is garbage, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. I haven't touched those accounts since the divorce was finalized. Nevertheless, we need you to come in for questioning tomorrow morning, Lane said. Don't leave town. After they left, Connie spread the papers across my kitchen table. Her fingers traced the transaction dates, and I watched her expression grow darker. Will, look at this. Every single transfer happened on days when you were working the Morrison factory job. I can prove you were 40 miles away. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at the documents, seeing Beth's handiwork in every forged signature. She'd always been clever with details, obsessing over our finances during the marriage. Now she was using that knowledge to destroy me. There's something else, I said, walking to my computer. A new email notification blinked in the corner. Someone accessed my online banking this afternoon, transferred $8,000 to an account I've never seen before. Connie looked over my shoulder as I opened the banking website. The account history showed a wire transfer to Coastal Investments LLC just 3 hours ago. She's not just framing you, Connie said quietly. She's actively stealing from you while she does it. I closed the laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where I'd lived my entire adult life. Beth knew exactly how to hurt me, attack my business, my reputation, everything I'd built. But she'd made one mistake. She thought I'd roll over and take it, just like I had during our marriage. Connie, I said, turning back to my sister. Remember how Beth always kept everything in that cloud storage account? The one she thought I didn't know about? A slow smile spread across Connie's face. The password she never changed because she used our old anniversary date? That's the one. I think it's time we did a little research of our own. As Connie opened her laptop, I felt something shift inside me. For 2 years, I'd been the nice guy, the one who didn't make waves. But Beth had just declared war, and she'd forgotten something important about electricians. We know exactly where all the wires run. The next morning, I sat in my basement with 3 cups of coffee and a growing sense of rage. Connie had spent the night digging through Beth's cloud storage, and what we found made my frame-up look like small change. Look at this, Connie said, pointing to her laptop screen. Email from Beth to someone named John McKay, dated 3 weeks ago. The parish accounts are ready. We'll never check the old business files, so the forged authorizations should hold up long enough. John McKay. I knew that name from somewhere, but couldn't place it. Keep reading. Once the embezzlement story breaks, his reputation will be finished. The electrical contracts will dry up, and he'll have to sell the business. That's when we make our real move. My hands clenched around my coffee mug. She's trying to destroy Parish Electric entirely. 40 years my family built this business. There's more, Connie said, scrolling down. Bank records show John McKay owns Coastal Investments. That $8,000? It went straight to him. I walked upstairs and grabbed my keys. Where does this John character work? McKay Auto Sales, out on Route 9. Will, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to introduce myself. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the lot at McKay Auto Sales with my work van, tools rattling in the back. The place screamed cheap flash, bright banners, shiny cars that probably had more problems than a condemned house. A tall guy in an expensive suit walked over, all teeth and handshakes. "John McKay," he said. "You look like a man who needs reliable transportation." "Will Parish," I replied, watching his face carefully. "I'm here about some electrical work." The smile flickered for just a second. He knew exactly who I was. "Electrical work? I think there might be some confusion." "No confusion at all. See, I'm an electrician, and I've been tracing some interesting connections. Wires that lead back to accounts, transfers, forged documents, that kind of electrical work." John's face went pale, but he recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I walked over to a bright red sports car with McKay's Pride painted on the windshield. Nice car. Probably his personal ride. "Beautiful vehicle," I said, running my hand along the hood. "Must be hell when the electrical system goes bad. All those sensitive computer chips, fuel injection systems. Amazing how one little problem can cascade through the whole engine." "Mr. Parish, I think you should leave." I pulled a small tool from my pocket. Just a standard wire stripper, but John didn't know that. "You know what's funny about modern cars? Everything runs on electricity now. Cut the right wire, and the whole thing becomes an expensive paperweight." "Are you threatening me?" "Just making conversation about automotive electrical systems. Professional interest?" I smiled and put the tool away. "But here's something that's not professional. Stealing from my business accounts. That's personal." John stepped back, glancing around the lot. We were alone, except for a mechanic working under a hood 50 yards away. "I don't know anything about your business accounts." "Sure you do. Coastal Investments. $8,000 transferred yesterday. Want to guess where I got that information?" The color drained from his face completely now. "You can't prove anything." "Maybe not yet. But I'm real good at following wires, John. And I've got all the time in the world to trace every connection back to its source." I walked back to my van, leaving John standing next to his precious red car. As I drove away, I caught him in my rearview mirror, already pulling out his phone, probably calling Beth, warning her that I wasn't going to roll over quietly. That evening, I met Nate Morrison, my foreman, at the Junction Bar. Nate was built like a linebacker, but had the steadiest hands I'd ever seen on an electrician. He'd been working for Parish Electric for 15 years, and I trusted him completely. "Heard you had some trouble with the police yesterday," Nate said, sliding a beer across the table. "Nothing I can't handle, but I might need some help with a side project." I filled him in on Beth's scheme and my visit to John McKay. Nate listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So, what do you want to do about it? Remember that job we did at McKay Auto last year? The electrical upgrade for their service bay?" Nate grinned. "The one where we had to run new lines to their parking lot security system?" "That's the one. I'm thinking their electrical system might need some maintenance. Late at night, when nobody's around to get hurt." "What kind of maintenance?" I pulled out a piece of paper and sketched a simple diagram. Nothing permanent, just enough to make John's life interesting for a few days. His car, maybe some of the lot lighting, small stuff. Nate studied the diagram. "This is about more than just getting even, isn't it? Beth thinks she can destroy my business and walk away clean. She's forgotten that I know how to build things, but I also know how to take them apart. Wire by wire, connection by connection." As we left the bar, I noticed Chelsea Morrison, no relation to Nate, sitting in a corner booth with 2 other women. Chelsea was Beth's best friend and biggest gossip in town. She was talking loudly about finally getting rid of parasites and cleaning house. I walked over to their table. "Evening, ladies. Chelsea, I couldn't help but overhear. Having pest problems?" Chelsea's face went red. "Will Parish. I heard you were having some legal troubles." "Nothing that won't work itself out. Funny thing about pests, though. Sometimes what looks like the problem is actually the solution. Sometimes the real pests are the ones you trusted most." I left them sitting there, Chelsea's mouth hanging open. By tomorrow, half the town would know I wasn't backing down from Beth's accusations. That was fine with me. Let them talk. In a small town, gossip was just another kind of electrical current, and I knew exactly how to direct the flow. 3 days later, I was ready to flip the switch on phase 2 of my plan. Connie had found more evidence in Beth's files, detailed plans to buy out my business contracts once my reputation was ruined, then flip them to John's investment company for triple the profit. They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to destroy everything my father had built. But Beth had always underestimated the power of small-town gossip. She'd been gone for 2 years, living in her fancy townhouse across town, shopping in the city. She'd forgotten how quickly word spreads in a place where everyone knows everyone else's business. I drove to Beth's place on Thursday evening, knowing she hosted her weekly wine night with Chelsea and the other local socialites. The townhouse was everything our old home wasn't. Sterile, modern, expensive, no warmth, no history, just status symbols and cold surfaces. The front door was unlocked, as usual. Beth always said crime didn't happen in nice neighborhoods. I walked in to find 4 women sitting around her glass dining table, wine glasses gleaming under the chandelier. "Will!" Beth's voice was sharp with surprise and anger. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk about coastal investments," I said, pulling out a folder of printed emails, and forged bank authorizations, and $8,000 that went missing from my accounts. Chelsea started to stand up, but I held up my hand. "Please, stay. This concerns all of you, since you'll be reading about it in the newspaper soon enough." Beth's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." I opened the folder and spread the printed emails across her expensive table, right next to the wine glasses. "Your own words, Beth. Planning to frame me for embezzlement while you and John McKay steal my business contracts." The other women leaned forward, reading the emails with growing shock. I watched Beth's carefully constructed social circle start to crack. "These are fake," Beth said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Funny thing about digital evidence. It's real easy to verify. Ask Connie. She's already turned copies over to Detective Lane." Chelsea picked up one of the emails, her eyes scanning the text. "Beth, this is your email address, and this talks about forging Will's signature on bank documents." "I can explain?" "No need," I interrupted. "The bank already confirmed the signatures were forged. Amazing what happens when you actually investigate instead of just taking someone's word for it." I gathered up the papers and headed for the door, but turned back for one final comment. "Ladies, you might want to be careful about your association with Beth here. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a serious charge. The police will probably want to interview anyone who might have known about her plans." As I walked out, I could hear the explosion of voices behind me. By tomorrow morning, every woman in that room would have called 10 other people. Beth's reputation was about to become the hottest topic in town. Outside, I found John McKay leaning against his red sports car in Beth's driveway. He must have been waiting for me. "You think you're real smart, don't you?" he said. "Smart enough." I walked over to his car and admired the paint job. "How's this beauty running? No electrical problems, I hope?" "You stay away from my car." I reached into my pocket and pulled out his car keys, which I'd lifted from his jacket when I'd bumped into him at the gas station that morning. "You mean these keys?" John lunged forward, but I was already moving. I tossed the keys into the storm drain at the end of Beth's driveway. They disappeared with a satisfying splash. You're crazy." "Just returning a favor. You mess with my livelihood, I mess with yours." I walked closer, and John actually backed up a step. "But here's the thing, John. Cars can be fixed. Reputations are harder to repair." I climbed into my van and drove away, leaving John staring into the storm drain. In my rearview mirror, I saw him pull out his phone, probably calling a locksmith. That would cost him a few $100s and a whole lot of embarrassment. The next morning, I was rewiring a kitchen outlet when my phone rang. Detective Lane's voice was different this time, less official, more curious. "Will, we need to talk again. But this time, I think you're going to like what I have to say." An hour later, I sat in Lane's office while he spread out bank records and email printouts across his desk. "Your sister brought us some interesting evidence," he said. "Turns out your ex-wife has been busy. The forged signatures are just the beginning." "What else did you find?" "John McKay has a record. 2 previous fraud convictions in other states. And coastal investments? It's not even a real company. Just a shell account he uses to funnel stolen money." I felt a surge of satisfaction. "So what happens now?" "Now we build a case. But Will, I have to warn you. Beth's not going down without a fight. She's already filed a complaint claiming you've been harassing her and threatening John." "Let her file all the complaints she wants. I've got something she doesn't." "What's that?" "The truth. And in a town this size, the truth has a way of getting around." Lane smiled for the first time since this whole mess started. "Just be careful, Will. Desperate people do desperate things." As I left the police station, I saw Mrs. Kavanaugh, my elderly neighbor, waiting by my van. She was 85 years old and knew more gossip than the town newspaper. "Will Parish, I heard some interesting stories at the beauty shop this morning," she said. "Seems your ex-wife has been telling tales about you." "What kind of tales?" "The kind that make people wonder what else she might be lying about. Chelsea Morrison was in there, talking about some emails she saw. Got the whole place buzzing." I smiled. Gossip travels fast. Faster than electricity, dear. And just as dangerous when it's not properly grounded. She patted my arm. Your father would be proud of how you're handling this. As Mrs. Kavanaugh walked away, I felt the first real satisfaction I'd had in days. Beth had always been good at manipulating people, but she'd forgotten something important about small towns. Once you lose people's trust, it's almost impossible to get it back. The wires were cut, and the current was starting to flow in my direction. Beth's revenge came fast and dirty, just like I expected. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a text from Nate. Check the town Facebook page. Now. The video was professionally edited, clearly shot with a hidden camera. It showed me at the charity fundraiser last month, apparently yelling at Margaret Hendricks, the sweet old lady who ran the local food bank. The audio was crystal clear. My voice definitely angry, saying things about worthless parasites and people who can't take care of themselves. Except I'd never said any of those things to Margaret. We'd been talking about a broken electrical outlet in the food bank kitchen, and I'd been frustrated with the previous contractor who'd done shoddy work. The video had been edited to make it look like I was attacking Margaret personally. My phone started ringing immediately. 3 of my biggest commercial contracts called within an hour, all with the same message. They were reassessing our business relationship pending clarification of my attitude toward community service. She's good, I admitted to Connie as we watched the video for the 5th time. This is exactly the kind of thing that destroys a small business in a small town. It's also completely fake, Connie said. Look at the editing cuts. She spliced together audio from different conversations. Doesn't matter. People see what they want to see, and Beth just gave them permission to think I'm a jerk. But 2 could play at the digital evidence game. While Beth was spreading her doctored video, I'd been busy with my own research. John McKay's past was even more interesting than Detective Lane had indicated. Take a look at this, I said, opening my laptop. John's previous fraud conviction in Pennsylvania. He scammed a widow out of her husband's life insurance money using fake investment documents. Connie read over my shoulder. 78 years old, lost her home because of him. Gets better. The second conviction in Ohio. He ran a fake charity for veterans, kept all the donations for himself. I'd already prepared an email with copies of John's criminal record, along with bank documents showing the connection between his previous scams and coastal investments. With one click, I could send it to every major business owner in town, plus the local newspaper editor. Will, are you sure about this? Once you send that, there's no going back. She started this war when she tried to destroy Dad's business. I'm just finishing it. I hit send. Within 2 hours, my phone was ringing again. But this time, the calls were different. Jim Morrison from Morrison Construction wanted to know if the John McKay on my documents was the same guy trying to bid on the new shopping center project. Sandra Walsh from the newspaper was asking for an interview about fraud in local business. The tide was turning, but Beth wasn't finished. That evening, I was having dinner at the Junction when Chelsea and 2 guys I didn't recognize walked in. The guys looked like trouble. Expensive clothes, gym muscles, the kind of men who solve problems with intimidation. Will Parish? The bigger one, probably Travis, based on Beth's emails, walked over to my table. We need to have a conversation. Nate was sitting across from me, and I saw his hand move toward the heavy beer mug on the table. I'm eating dinner. Make an appointment. This can't wait. You've been spreading lies about some friends of ours. I don't spread lies. I share public records and documented facts. I took another bite of my burger, keeping my voice calm. If your friends don't like their own criminal history being public knowledge, maybe they should have thought about that before committing crimes. Travis leaned closer. Maybe you should think about minding your own business. The funny thing is, it became my business when your friends started stealing from me. The second guy, smaller but meaner looking, put his hand on my shoulder. We're trying to be reasonable here. That's when Nate stood up, 6'4" and 250 pounds of electrician muscle. Take your hand off my boss. The tension in the bar was thick enough to cut with wire strippers. Every conversation had stopped, and I could feel everyone watching us. This was exactly the kind of scene Beth wanted, me looking like the aggressor, causing trouble in public. Instead, I stood up slowly and smiled. Gentlemen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You're here to intimidate me into keeping quiet about John McKay's criminal record. But here's the thing. That information is already public. Anyone can look it up. I pulled out my phone and showed them the Pennsylvania court records. See? Public information. John McKay, convicted of defrauding elderly victims. Nothing I'm saying that isn't already a matter of legal record. Travis grabbed for my phone, but I was ready. I stepped back and let him stumble forward, off balance. Then I did something he wasn't expecting. I helped him regain his footing. Careful there, friend. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. The move completely diffused the situation. Instead of a fight, it looked like I was being helpful. Travis was confused, his partner was frustrated, and everyone in the bar had just watched me take the high road. Like I said, gentlemen, no lies here. Just public information about public criminal convictions. If that makes your friends uncomfortable, well, that's what we call consequences. They left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. As Nate and I finished our dinner, I found myself thinking about what Detective Lane had said. Desperate people do desperate things. They'll be back, Nate said quietly. Probably. But next time, I'll be ready. That night, I sat in my basement workshop thinking about my next move. Beth had escalated to physical intimidation, which meant she was getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and I was counting on Beth to make a big one. I pulled out the folder of evidence Connie had gathered from Beth's cloud storage. Buried in the financial records was something I'd missed before, a pattern of transfers that went back almost a year before our divorce was final. Beth hadn't just planned to frame me recently. She'd been stealing from our joint accounts while we were still married, moving money into hidden accounts that she could access after the divorce. The embezzlement she was accusing me of? She'd been doing it herself for over 18 months. I smiled as I started preparing my next surprise. Beth thought she was playing chess, but she'd forgotten something important about electricians. We're used to working in the dark, and we always check our connections twice. The abandoned textile factory on the east side of town had been empty for 15 years, ever since the jobs moved overseas, but it still had electricity, thanks to a maintenance contract Parish Electric had held since my father's time. I knew every wire, every circuit, every dark corner of that building. It was the perfect place for a private conversation with John McKay. Getting him there was easier than I'd expected. A simple phone call, disguising my voice, claiming to be a potential investor interested in the factory property. John's greed overcame his caution, and he agreed to meet me there at 9 p.m. to discuss development opportunities. I arrived an hour early to set up. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would actually hurt anyone, just some theatrical lighting and a good sound system. I'd learned a few things about drama from watching Beth manipulate people all those years. John's red sports car pulled up right on time. He'd gotten it running again after our little incident with the keys, but I noticed he parked it far from the building, probably worried about more electrical problems. "Hello, John," I called out as he entered the main floor of the factory. My voice echoed in the empty space, amplified by speakers I'd hidden throughout the building. "Who's there? I'm here to meet an investor." "You are. I'm investing in your future." I hit a switch, and spotlights illuminated John from 3 different angles, leaving him squinting and disoriented. Specifically, your future behind bars. "Will Parish. What the hell is this?" "This is a reckoning." I stepped out of the shadows, staying just outside the circle of light. "See, I've been doing some research on you and Beth. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look." John tried to move toward the exit, but I'd positioned the lights to create blind spots. Every direction he turned, he was either blinded by spotlights or stumbling in darkness. "You can't keep me here against my will." "I'm not keeping you anywhere. Door's right behind you, but before you go, you might want to hear what I found in Beth's files." I pulled out a portable speaker and played the first recording. Beth's voice, crystal clear, discussing the plan to frame me for embezzlement while she and John stole my business contracts. "That doesn't prove anything," John said, but his voice was shaky now. "How about this one?" The second recording was even more damaging, Beth and John discussing his previous fraud convictions and how to hide his criminal past from potential business partners. John was sweating now, despite the cool evening air. You can't use illegally obtained recordings in court. Who said anything about court? These recordings are going to the newspaper, the Better Business Bureau, and every contractor in the county. Amazing how fast word spreads when people realize they're dealing with a convicted criminal. "What do you want?" "I want the truth. All of it. Beth's embezzlement, your fake investment company, the plan to destroy my business, everything." I hit another switch, and a video camera mounted on a tripod whirred to life, its red recording light clearly visible. "You're insane if you think I'm going to confess to anything." "Then don't confess. Just tell me the truth about what Beth asked you to do." For the next 20 minutes, I played recordings, showed documents, and laid out the entire conspiracy piece by piece. John kept denying everything, but his story kept changing, contradicting itself with each new piece of evidence. Finally, I played the recording that broke him, a conversation between Beth and John discussing how to get rid of Will permanently by framing him not just for embezzlement, but for threatening John physically. "She recorded that without telling me," John said suddenly. "Recorded what?" "The conversation about making it look like you threatened me. She said it was just insurance in case we needed to escalate things. So you're admitting there was a plan? John realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late. The camera had caught everything. Look, Will, this got out of hand. It was supposed to be simple. Just enough financial pressure to make you sell the business cheap. Beth said you'd never fight back. She was wrong about that. Yeah, I can see that now. John looked around at the theatrical lighting setup, the cameras, the speakers. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment I realized what you two were doing. The difference between me and Beth is that I don't just plan revenge, I plan justice. I gathered up my equipment while John stood there, looking defeated. The recordings of this conversation go to Detective Lane tomorrow morning, along with all the other evidence Connie and I have collected. What about Beth? What about her? She's the one who planned all this. I just went along with it. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to steal from me. I headed for the exit, then turned back. Oh, and John? That red car of yours? You might want to have the electrical system checked. I'd hate for you to get stranded somewhere. As I drove home, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. Not just because I'd gotten John's confession on tape, but because I'd done it without violence, without breaking any laws, without becoming the kind of person Beth had tried to paint me as. But the real test was still coming. Beth was the mastermind, and she wasn't going to go down without a fight. The courthouse steps were crowded with people when I arrived the next morning. Word had gotten out about Beth and John's arrest. Detective Lane had moved fast once he heard the confession recording. But I knew Beth well enough to know she'd try one last desperate play. She didn't disappoint me. Will Parish is a liar and a criminal. Beth's voice carried across the courthouse square as she stood on the steps, surrounded by reporters and curious onlookers. He's trying to frame me for crimes he committed himself. I parked my van and walked closer, staying at the edge of the crowd. Beth looked desperate. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her expensive clothes wrinkled. The composed manipulator I'd been married to for 8 years was finally cracking under pressure. My ex-husband has been harassing me for months, she continued. He broke into my home, threatened my friends, and now he's fabricated evidence to make me look guilty of his crimes. A few people in the crowd were nodding along. Beth still had her charm, even in desperation. But I'd been preparing for this moment. That's interesting, I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Tell them about coastal investments, Beth. She spun around, her eyes wild when she saw me. You have no right to be here. It's a public courthouse. I have every right. I pulled out my phone and held it up. Tell them about the fake company you and John created to steal money from my business accounts. Those are lies. Are they? I hit play on my phone speaker, and John's voice filled the courthouse square, his confession from the factory, admitting to the embezzlement scheme and implicating Beth as the mastermind. The crowd went silent. Even the reporters stopped talking, straining to hear every word of the recording. That's fake, Beth screamed. He forced John to say those things. Funny thing about the truth, I said, walking closer to the courthouse steps. It doesn't change, no matter how loud you yell. Detective Lane appeared at the top of the steps, along with 2 uniformed officers. Mrs. Parish, we need you to come with us. I'm not going anywhere. This is all a setup. That's when Connie stepped out of the crowd, holding a thick folder of documents. Actually, Beth, it's not a setup. It's just good record-keeping. She opened the folder and pulled out bank statements, emails, and financial records. 18 months of embezzlement, documented down to the penny. Your own emails, describing exactly how you planned to frame Will while you stole his business. Beth's face went completely white. Those files are private. You had no right to access them. You gave Will access to your cloud storage during the divorce proceedings, remember? For financial disclosure. You just forgot to revoke his access afterward. The crowd was murmuring now, pieces of the story clicking together. Chelsea Morrison pushed through to the front, her face a mask of betrayal and anger. Beth, you told me Will was the one stealing money. You said he was trying to frame you. He was. He is. Then explain this, Connie said, holding up a printed email. Your message to John McKay, dated 3 weeks ago, talking about how easy it would be to destroy Will's reputation once the embezzlement story broke. Beth looked around desperately, realizing that her social circle, the women who had supported her through the divorce, who had believed her stories about my failures as a husband, were all staring at her with disgust and disbelief. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. He ruined my life. The divorce left me with nothing. The divorce left you with half of everything we owned, I said quietly, including money you'd already stolen from our joint accounts. Detective Lane stepped forward. Mrs. Parish, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and filing false police reports. As the handcuffs clicked around Beth's wrists, she looked directly at me. You think you've won, but you've lost everything. Your reputation, your friends, your standing in this community. Nobody will ever trust you again. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night. The crowd began to disperse as the police led Beth away. John was already in custody. His bail revoked after the confession recording proved he'd lied to the court about his involvement. Nate appeared at my side, grinning broadly. So what now, boss? Now we go back to work. Parish Electric has a reputation to rebuild. Think people will give you a chance? I looked around at the faces in the dispersing crowd. Some were sympathetic, others still suspicious. But Mrs. Kavanaugh gave me a thumbs up from across the square, and Jim Morrison nodded approvingly as he walked past. In a small town, the truth eventually wins out, I said. It just takes time. As we walked back to the van, Connie fell into step beside us. Will, there's something else you should know. The district attorney is interested in Beth's other financial activities. Turns out she's been running similar scams on other people. Other people? Remember her friend Sandra from the wine nights? Beth convinced her to invest in a fake real estate development. And that charity fundraiser where she was treasurer? There's money missing from those accounts too. I stopped walking. How much money? Enough to turn this from a local fraud case into a federal investigation. Beth's looking at serious prison time. We reached the van, and I stood there for a moment, looking back at the courthouse. 2 years ago, Beth had walked out of my life, claiming I was a failure who would never amount to anything. Now she was facing federal fraud charges while I was rebuilding the business my father had started. You know what the funny thing is? I said to Connie and Nate. She was right about one thing. I did lose everything, my marriage, my trust in people, my peace of mind, but sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what's actually worth keeping. I climbed into the van and started the engine. Parish Electric had work to do, and for the first time in 2 years, I was looking forward to getting back to it. The wires were cut, the current was flowing in the right direction, and Beth's house of lies had finally collapsed under its own weight. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people see who you really are, and who they really are too.